It had her name and.
She did do a mullet toss.
So it was something else, it was some sort of,
If your principal is
Chairman.
Massa Elementary, you will be tossing a mullet.
So that, well, we'll have to ask her, so very active, I appreciate you sharing.
And she's
that with us.
feeling well, and is she listening to, you know, her boss, Mr. Hebert? And
She is listening to Mr. Hebert. She is.
we do know that she takes his texts
Yes, she does.
in priority.
That's why I have all these donuts. Because I bet Mr. Hebert that she would text me back first. And she texted Mr. Hebert. She had no idea we were sitting right next to each other. I said, I'll bet you a donut with sprinkles. Well, while I was there, I had no point just getting him donuts. I give everybody something.
Okay. Thank you, Alice, appreciate that. Okay, now we're ready for the State of the District Part 2.
Good afternoon. Last month, we were here and we presented part 1, where we concentrated on our ELA and social studies data. And today, we are concentrating on our math and science data. You have the PowerPoints, and I wanted to just, why is it not?
I love the way you present this. I mean, I love it. Visual learner and everything is just so organized.
Well, it's a team effort. Each one of us has our groups, and they kind of just all send it to us, our PowerPoints, and we compile it together for one presentation. But no, I'm glad that.
I thought it was because you were a dancer.
Mr. Kennedy, how do you leave that? But thank you, team. It's great.
You're welcome. So as you can see here, State of the District Part 1. Last month we talked about the district and the school grades, and like I said, the ELA and social studies, and what our district is doing with initiatives and action steps regarding them. Today, we're going to talk about, you see there's a few more bullets there. We are going to break down the math and science data for you, as well as some other data that we received, like our AP, IB, industry certification, dual enrollment, ACT and SAT. Then we're going to have some district initiatives and action steps that our district is doing pertaining to that data. What does it look like in the classroom? And then also, if you remember last month, we asked if you wanted us to tag on technology and student services to part 2 or have a separate one, and it was voted to tag it on. So we'll be ending with our technology and student services at the end. Okay? All right. So our what and our why, first of all. Here's our district grade, how we got our district grade of a B. Notice I highlighted this time math and science and acceleration success, because that is what we will be discussing this time. So the mathematics, we did get an achievement score. 61% of our students, grades 3 through high school, because EOCs are included in that, made a 3 or higher. We had 56% make learning gains, and then obviously you see 44% of our lowest quartile made a learning gain. In science, 61% of our kids got a 3 or higher, and that includes our 5th and 8th grade science, as well as our biology EOCs. And then the acceleration success I did highlight as well, because today we will be talking about that other data, AP, IB, dual enrollment, industry certification, that do pertain to how our acceleration success is measured there. We had 52% of our students that did make acceleration based on AP, IB, or dual enrollment or industry certification data. Okay, so starting with our science data, I know that you received these yesterday, so you can kind of have a little look at it. I'm not sure why that is looking like that. Does it look like that on yours, the
Yes.
grade 5?
I have mine.
Is it like that on yours?
No, you sent me, I got yours, so it's mine works.
I sent you mine. I sent everybody mine, right?
Oh, but I think what we're reading off of yours.
Okay. Yeah, but it's interesting that grade 5 looks like that, because it did not, on like my printout, it does not look like that, and it
Mine
doesn't look
goes
like
from
that on my
74 to 51.
Okay, so based on our grade 5 and grade 8 data, this is science. Notice how we have it set up. It's from highest to lowest, with percent passing with a 3 or higher on the grade 5 and the grade 8. Grade 5 is to your left, grade 8 is to your right. The district data is up in the little boxes in the corner. Notice how I color coded those. If they're green, that means our district did improve from last year to this year as a whole in that area. Where if it stays white, we remain the same. Where if you see that box in future ones, if it's red, our district did decline in that area. Some things just to note here is that Crystal River Primary and Crystal River Middle did make significant gains in science compared to how they did last year. Crystal River Primary did a 24% point gain, which is pretty significant. Crystal River Middle made a 14-point gain. So you can see there, you see them in comparison to the other schools, the district and the state, but just knowing that they really did make some significant gains with science in those grade levels. Remember, it is apples to oranges. These are a different set of kids, so it's not like it's the same group that we are comparing when you look at that data. We also broke it down into clusters. So here, again, you see grades 5 and grade 8. Elementary is the light green, the middle is the darker green. You see here that by clusters, you have nature of science, earth and space science, physical science, and life science are all of the different areas that the children got questions in. So you see how they each did, and then the black bar is telling you the state average for each one of those clusters per grade level. So you have an idea there of some areas that we are scoring on average higher than the rest of the state, and some that were right there with them. And this data specifically, especially the cluster data, helps teachers with instructional purposes, versus just seeing how many of my kids passed it. This really does break it down more for them.
Let me ask, when you do the state average, what area of the state maybe brings the grades down a bit? When it's the lowest scoring area, or is it a lowest scoring area?
When you say area, you're talking about like what county?
Yeah, or south, northeast, what does that be?
No, there's really, in every, I guess, because there's different regions of the state. In every region, there are some lower performing and higher performing in each different area.
So there's not one
There isn't a particular area. Like I wouldn't say, it's southern Florida is what's causing this.
Darn.
No.
Thank you for that question.
No, but I noticed that back in terms of the reading and all, there was one, Michigan County, one county in northern Florida that seemed to have a real struggle, so I was just wondering.
And it's also, of course, size is also a piece of it as well. Because it is aggregated, so it's not, your Miami-Dade is not going to be equal to Citrus County. It is aggregated where number of students does play a piece in it, which makes it more fair of a score.
Oh, it is.
The state average. Okay, biology, this is the other part of the science. In biology, here you see our different schools, how they scored. In the red, you do see that we did decline by 3% from the previous year. All of our schools did go down except for Lecanto High did increase by 1% compared. But again, remember, this is not the same students. Like we do in reading and in math, or ELA and math, you are looking more at the gain of how they did from previous year in the same subject area, where in science, it's difficult to do that with. Then here's your biology clusters. So there you see, same like we did for our science, our 5th and 8th grade science. This helps our teachers and instructional staff to really kind of see what areas they need to target instruction, especially when they start seeing a pattern of 2 or 3 more years in a row. If my school for 2 or 3 years in a row seems to be lower than the state or the district in those areas, that would definitely raise question to instruction versus it just being a lower group of kids that year.
Right, and how does one follow up on that when you see that pattern? What does the school do?
Well, that's definitely, the next part of our presentation is going to be that's where we bring in, of course, our professional development and our district team to, of course, assist. We have our Science TOSA, who will also help with our instructional staff of, because it might be just one school. And it becomes part of their SIP plan as well, if that is something that they are targeting. And we use our resources here at the district to help provide any kind of professional development that those teachers might need. What resources do they need maybe to help them do that? Some other schools that are scoring higher in it or other districts, we talk to them and see if we can share those resources. Those are the kinds of things that we do when we see this data. And we have those conversations starting over the summer when this data comes in and we start meeting with those admin teams. Okay, here you've got math. Now, math grades 3 through 8 takes the mathematics test. You see that I put them all together on this graph. You've got elementary schools are all your greens, your middle schools are your reds or burgundies, district is always going to be that goldish color, and the state you see there is a grayish color. And this is just percent scoring 3 or higher.
The middle school's on that. I know we have a significant number that are doing high school math.
They're not in this.
No, but that's what I was just gonna say.
They're not
As a
in-
result of that,
Correct.
that takes out a large number, and just like we've seen at the high school level, the same situation, it appears that we're starting to see that at the middle school, where what's left are these kids that are basically are struggling a little bit more with math, because the advanced ones
Or taking algebra.
are taking the algebra, or they're taking it at their grade level, maybe if they're, I guess we don't really accelerate at the same way a 6th grader who might ultimately take 7th grade algebra isn't accelerated really in 6th grade as often.
Well, yes, however, we do have a plan for that, and I know Mr. Hebert is going to be part of that, talking about
Right.
that in his
But
presentation.
what's left, I guess, what I'm saying is we're having this.
Correct.
That.
And you definitely see it when you break it down by grade level.
Yeah.
You'll see in 6th grade, they're pretty strong in math compared to the 8th grade regular math scores.
That was
because
what I
that's when
saw
they're
here,
going.
so-
Correct. This right here is a combination of, your grades, your middle schools, it's the grades 6 through 8 combined together, and your elementaries 3 through 5 together. Where when you, what? I don't know why it's too, there you go. When you start breaking it down by grade level, like here's elementary, your grades, obviously 3, 4th, and 5th, all separated. You see the state average is the black line, the district average is that is the gold line. As a whole, grades 3 through 5, we did increase by 2%, in math. And then when you look at your
That's what I was.
6th, 7th, and 8th. You see, we did, now remember this part here does include the up in the corner, I'm sorry, grades 6 through 8, that corner box where we did go down 1%, that did include your algebra EOCs in that data, because I pulled that right from the school grades.
So
But
if
the
I'm
bars
an
do
8th
not.
grader and I take the algebra EOC, that part is in that red box, you're saying?
Yes.
But it's not in the
bars.
data below
Correct,
because.
the bars are just the math,
Those
the
are just
6th,
right.
7th, and 8th grade math, correct. Now here's where we get into our EOCs. So for algebra, we did break it down. You have your middle schools in the green and your high schools are in the burgundy. We also put the state average with the line going across. So obviously the state average for your middle school is going to be a higher state average than your high schools. Because like you said, Thomas, that the stronger and higher math students are obviously going to be taking algebra in the middle school, not in the high school. So our high school algebra scores are normally going to be on the lower end when compared to our middle school scores.
Crystal River, I know they're slightly lower than the middle average, but if I recall, they had a general philosophy of trying to be more inclusive.
Yes, Chris River Middle did have.
And as a result, that their data might trend a little downward, but in a lot of ways, they were also being very successful, or could theoretically be successful with students.
Yes.
With that
Yes.
approach.
Mhm.
So that data, to me, I guess it's okay to take that into consideration. in
Absolutely,
looking at-
absolutely. Also, just know that, with this data, it's not on here, but Crystal River High School did improve by 20% from last year in algebra, just as a plus. I mean, they are at 42% passing, and they were a lot lower last year with the Algebra 1, with the FSA algebra being newer to them. So they went from 22 to 42, which was pretty significant. Also note that the state, the whole state actually decreased 2 points last year from this year to this year, where our district increased. So I like to always note that when the district increases, even though the state is decreasing, that is something to bring to your attention. Geometry, here you see, now geometry in the middle schools, you should probably even see even higher, because in order for them to have taken geometry, they obviously took algebra as a 7th grader. So these are your really strong math students. And then, of course, your geometry then in the high schools there.
If you're maybe 97 or 100, what are you going to do next year?
Try to keep that. Try to keep that. Try to keep it.
With an
You're doing
entirely
something
different
right.
set of kids.
Different set of kids doing it right. Trying to, and that all comes into play
They're
of course,
touching the
there's
ceiling.
Well, that means, because remember, these are your really strong math students, so 100% of them, so I mean, that all comes into play. Not only is it great instruction, but obviously those schools are also selecting students to take these courses, or approving that, really obviously are ready for it, so then the question is, are there more that are ready for it, or, are we right on with what we are doing right now? So those questions, of course, get discussed as well.
And Amy, on your previous slide, I did need to mention, and I think most of the board knows this, but just as a reminder, these are just the EOCs on those percentages. It's not necessarily a success that at the end of the day, we may have those students take perks to pass the completion for the state.
Absolutely.
So while I know it, these again represent some of our struggling learners in math. We don't just leave it at 39%. I'm saying, for example, at Citrus High. They're going to go back, and some of them may either take the course again, but a lot of them are going to be taking the PERT.
Or
They're going to be having interventions. They're going to maybe the ACT or something.
No, not
We
for-
not use the ACT. Okay.
ACT and SAT are not used for the math,
That's
just
right. It's
PERT
used for
is
the
looking forward.
language art.
But there's algebra retakes as
So
well.
the algebra retakes. So that's not necessarily going to. It's not always captured in this particular
Right,
piece.
no, this is just the state
Where the middle
assessments.
schoolers, pretty much they're done. They're going to succeed and they're going to be done, and that's why that score is successful. Where the other ones, there's a story that still goes on.
Correct, and they still need to meet that graduation requirement.
What was the 39, you referenced this, was I?
Yeah, just because that was the lowest. I didn't want that to be.
39% of the
It's
students
on,
pass 3 or
oh.
higher on algebra.
Oh, okay, I was looking at this, the screen up here, it said 44%.
Yeah, this is.
He's
on
looking at slide
geometry.
12.
Geometry, I got you said on algebra. Okay.
Right, geometry is a little higher, a little stronger than the algebra. You see across the board there. And then algebra 2, in this one, Citrus High School did improve by 12% from last year. Now, with this one, I wanted to note that Lecanto High School does have a different philosophy and process of who they have taking Algebra 2 compared to the other high schools. And I think that definitely caters to that number that you see they're much stronger than the others. LHS's end, their total that are taking Algebra 2 is much smaller than the other high schools. So, because
How
they
is
do
that?
more of a selection, they have a different process in who is taking the Algebra 2 course.
But how do they complete the requirements? for
Well, Algebra
graduation?
2 is not necessarily a requirement for graduation,
But they
they
still
just
get
take
full.
another math credit instead.
So what they're doing is they're pulling them into.
Another math course that does not have an EOC, if they are a lower performing student. For many post-secondary schools, it is prerequisite, correct? So those, right. You're correct.
Is it not practical geometry, but what's the
Informal geometry? Informal
So
geometry.
algebra, I'm assuming it's algebra 1A, algebra 1B, informal geometry and geometry is how they're getting to their 4th credits in there. Or
Liberal arts, math, correct. There's also, math college readiness.
The college
those-
readiness would be another.
Yeah. Okay,
They're all taking those criteria.
correct.
And
Now-
then if they're looking for college, the problem is it puts them into that algebra 2 track.
Yes. And exactly. And the Lecanto is aware of that, they know that, and their guidance is supported, helping the students make those decisions. Okay, so then you have learning gains, and this map for learning gains, remember that was a piece of the puzzle for our district grade. This includes all students that take either the math FSA assessment or math EOC. So these are all combined together. So your Algebra 1, your Algebra 2, Geometry EOCs, as well as the 3rd through 8th grade math. So that's why you see I have every school from elementary, middle, and high, they're color-coded. Your blue is high schools, middle schools burgundy, the green is elementary. And you see how the percent of students that made a learning gain on those tests. Okay? Then the next one is the same schools and so forth, but these are the students that are in the bottom quartile that made a learning gain. So there you see a significant, Floral City Elementary definitely stood out on that one. And, we're talking to them and seeing what did they do, was their target last year, that they were really focusing on math strategies and so forth last year, and, kind of bringing those conversations to the other schools as well. All right, so that is our FSA data. Now going into where we have our other data, we start with our AP enrollment and pass rate. So here you see some trend from 2007 to now. where you see, obviously our open enrollment happened midway there, where you have more students that are being given the opportunity to take the AP assessments. And then you see the red is the not pass versus the top AP pass. So at the very end, we did have 31% that did pass an AP assessment. That's 584 of our students, compared to 535 of our students last year that did pass an AP exam.
Second largest in our history of recent
Correct.
history.
Correct. It is the second largest.
Will we be still educating those? I know in the past, we used to kind of go out and do a presentation to help educate parents and students as to why they should take AP and dual enrollment classes and the
I believe the
benefits.
schools have that as part of their, yes, as part of their parent nights and so forth. They incorporate that into their presentations
Still do that. Yes.
during their curriculum night. The next one is per school. So you see here per school, and again, you have some longitudinal data from 2014 to now. So you can kind of see some trends for each school compared to the district and the state. We thought that it was good to note that in 2014-15, we did have approximately $204,000 from FTE funds that were brought to our schools and used for bonuses and school funding for AP, which is a nice amount that we, and that hopefully increases each year as well.
But, and I say this because I talk to the public a lot about this. Florida First has a different model and objective when it comes to AP than sometimes other parts of the country. A lot of times you can't get even into an AP class unless you are recommended.
Right.
And then you don't, still, just because you took the class doesn't mean you're going to be recommended to take the test either.
You say that's Florida, there's districts that also believe.
Is
what you're
that,
saying.
okay. And
Mhm.
and in Citrus County,
We don't.
we have believed that basically it's an open enrollment,
Right.
as well as the expectation is if you take the course,
You take the
you
test.
take the test.
Correct.
But beyond that, it's not just then that's our model, but the success in our longitudinal data has shown that our students that even score a 1 or a 2 in an AP exam, often I believe it's in the 60% of those students will not need college intervention later on because they've learned the rigor of studying in high school. So the accomplishment that we've learned is that those students will have actually learned how to be successful in college courses later on by their willingness to take those courses, those more rigorous courses at an earlier age.
I mean, they are passing the course, it's just the test.
It's just
like
the
obviously
test
we don't
I'm
have-
referring
And the test is not a part of their grade, it does not have any negative impact if they do not pass the AP exam on the student.
So I say that to remind us that while the state's data does not necessarily always correlate in this pass rate,
Right.
we have a different model
Open
and
enrollment
approach to
versus the
that.
state does not.
And I think there's a very positive benefit to that, to our students. And I don't want us to lose sight of that. That's really,
The part you said about the test is the key thing. If they take the class, we require them to
Take the test.
That other districts do not do that. That the student make that decision, they don't take the test.
and I believe that's appropriate for us to do.
Okay, then we have our IB data. This is, happens at Lecanto High School. You see the difference.
Question.
Yes.
The math stuff that you had for Ms. Chudson over there, was really high, did that include the IB students?
If they took one of the math, if they took either Algebra 1, Algebra 2, or
Okay.
Geometry, they're in that data.
All right.
Yes.
I wondered that.
And I believe probably quite a few of those students are in the Algebra 2 data there, that, they would be students that would be taking that course. Okay, so here you have your IB 2016. You've got all the different tests, names are there. You see the IB pass rate versus the not pass rate. Mr. Derek Bittner really does help with the collection and analyzing of this data. So I just wanted to give him a little shout out there if he's hearing this. Then you see the bottom, you have the different charts there that show you the 2015, basically just numbers there. Total exams passed versus the pass rate, the total number of actual IB students in that class, and then actually how many that get the IB diploma, and then the percent of them that actually received the IB diploma. Compared to that middle chart is where we are this year. We did add that final chart over there. Mr. Bittner likes the idea of, we do have a college acceptance rate that they collect every year with the four main colleges, 4 main Florida colleges. So there you see the percent of the students that do get accepted into those schools that were IB students in our district. And the lagging data right above it, we had around $123,000 because we do get, of course, FTE funds for IB tests, just like we do for AP, that do come back to our district. For our
That's
students.
right, that's very good.
Well, if you see the pass rate there, because the more money, I mean, you get FTE for the passing of the tests, and you get the FTE funds for, the diplomas that are received, the IB diplomas and the passing of the tests. So the higher the pass rate, of course, the more FTE funds that we would receive.
Just an interesting note, Duval County, there was a recent article that their school board was struggling as to what to do with IB because, not with the IB, but that their IB schools were scoring only at a 35% pass rate. And I sent the article to Mr. Bittner, who was saying that's, really we should look for a 50% at the very least. And I know he's never satisfied with where
Right.
things are. He's always wanting to improve. But I think you can see the difference of just what we have compared to some of those others. So.
Absolutely. Dual enrollment. Here you have a comparison from 2015 to 2016. Here you see the credits earned by the actual total number of students. In 2015, 383 students compared to this year, or 2016, we had 362 students, so slightly smaller amount of students. However, if you notice the amount of credits though earned was even a smaller amount. It was smaller, of course, than the previous year, but a narrower gap there. You see the different schools with how many each received. Most of them, as you can see, like Christopher High School had more students that did dual enrollment and way more credits earned due to it. And then with Canto High, you see the same thing there.
There is a school there, though, that seems to have had a significant difference in philosophy or something.
AS not offering that as much right. Remember, they also, though, they have reasons for it. Why they don't offer that as much as they did before. I know that they offered, what was it the year before? I'm trying to think of what actual dual enrollment those students going to, basically to leave AES to go to CF to take a dual enrollment course and then return back to AES, their time with them is so short. I'm not sure if that was a piece of it as well, but yes, you're correct. They went from 24 students in 2015 to only 5 that were still doing the
171 credits to 32 credits.
right.
That's-
Obviously, the number of students that were benefiting from that definitely decreased. Then you see here, this is always a nice graphic, especially for parents, when they see the amount of costs that that they are saving due to this. And you can also see the pass rate, of course. When you compare your dual enrollment, I know a lot of times parents see this and say, okay, so my child takes a dual enrollment course, passes it with an A, B, or C, they get that college credit. They take an AP course, where obviously our pass rate is a lot less when you look at how they get a college credit is only if they pass that AP test. There is a significant difference in, the chances of my child getting a college credit at the end of each one of these courses. Our dual enrollment program obviously is is way more effective than the AP when you talk about the percent of students that do leave it with a college credit. So here, as you see, the university savings that we're looking at there is 1.7 million when you compile it all together.
But that's not the same credit hour for Central Florida College, though, is it?
But see, no, that's the Florida University cost average is $700 per credit.
Right, what is it for the
CF,
CF?
it's like half of that. It's, like I want to say like CF is half of that, is it 3?
So maybe it'd be good to show that.
Three something.
3 something.
Yes. Okay.
Correct. Industry certification, we made some great gains here. As you can see at the bottom there, in 2015, we had 308 tests taken, where this year we had 448, and with that, we went from a 67% pass rate to an 80% pass rate, which very proud of that. So definitely making some gains there with our industry certification exams. And this we do see in that acceleration piece as well, helping our district, getting that grade.
And that's across the board certifications from CNAs to Microsoft drafting, all of those are combined.
Correct. You got it. Okay, the next two graphs is ACT and then SAT. The ACT data here, it's trend data, and we are looking at the composite score is what we're looking at here. So 19 being that college-ready composite score. remembering that when you're looking at it. The bars are representing the different, the national average is that burgundy or pinkish bar. Then you've got the state average is the gray bar, and then our district average is that yellow bar. So when you just look at that yellow bar, you see each year from 2013 to now, every year it has increased slightly. We are going the right way. The lines are representing each school. So there you've got the green is representing Lecanto High School, the black is representing Citrus High, and then the blue is Crystal River High. So you see their trend data as well, and again, that is the average composite score. It is noted there in the bright yellow star that the district average, we're at 21 is our composite score average. That is the highest that we've been since 2008. So we are definitely, as a district, moving in the right direction there. You do have over on the right-hand side there, just to give you an idea of the number of students. So you know what that N is when we are coming up with those averages. The number of students from 2015 to 2016 that actually took the ACT sometime last year, 15-16 school year.
So
No,
the
sorry.
ACT test prep that's being done at Citrus High School will hopefully increase that.
We see that next year.
Hopefully we'll see that next year.
That's what we're hoping.
It's also contributed to the increased number of kids that are taking the ACT. You look over the Citrus-
170, 203.
Citrus High went up 33 kids taking and attempting the ACT, which is good. You want more kids to take the ACT.
Also, though, remember, we have more kids now taking it, trying to pass the FSA concordance score. Because remember that graduation requirement, that 10th grade ELA requirement, the previous year when it was our FSA was the first year, remember we had less than 50% of our students pass that 10th grade. So that would mean that these kids, of course, are going to take the retakes, but they are also now scheduled, more of them, to take the ACT, trying to meet the requirement that way if they don't pass the retakes. So that also, I think, plays a piece in it, that we have more kids taking it also, and they might be lower performing in ELA because they did not pass that 10th grade ELA, and they're simply taking it to try to meet that reading requirement as well.
Are the Academy of Environmental Science divvied up their schools?
The homeschools. Yes. The SAT, because previously, before they did the new assessment that just started at the end of last year, they didn't give a composite. They separated up with critical reading and mathematics. So here you do see it separated, where on the left you have your reading component, and again, it's the same colors, the same bars that mean the same thing. You do see as a whole we are kind of moving in the right direction in our reading. Math, you kind of see some inconsistencies there when you look at our district, that yellow bar. You see kind of going up and down, where the reading, we seem to kind of slowly be making some progress there. And then, of course, and then you see the school averages with the lines.
It's interesting though on math that even though they're a little separated, they actually are following the same trend line on all three of those schools there.
Oh, the schools, yes.
Yeah, so I mean,
Individually.
yeah.
Whereas when it went up, when it went up, when it went down, went
Yeah,
down.
they all pretty much.
Except for the very last one. Except for
Oh, you're right,
2016.
yeah.
Is kind of where Crystal River did something a little different.
Well, the Mullins were doing well then.
And they also did a little better in the reading as well at Crystal River there in the middle. I mean, in 2016, Crystal River seemed to make some improvements. Please note that, remember, the score of 440 is that college ready for SAT. So that is the data piece of today. The rest now we're going to be going into what our initiatives and action steps with Mr. Hebert and Mr. Rowland.
Good afternoon. I'm going to take the science portion and address elementary through high school, and then Mr. Hebert's going to talk about the mathematics portion. As you heard Ms. Crowell give us the data, we're above the state average in elementary, middle, and high. We're 11 points above the state average in elementary, 4 in the middle, and 2 at the high school level. And just a couple things to note. The 5th grade test is a culmination of 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade standards. Just like in middle school, it's a culmination of the 6th and 7th and 8th is what they're tested on. So that's important to note because part of what we do is the spiraling of their standards by grade level. So, but I'll get to that in a little bit. First slide I want to talk about is professional development. Some of the things that we're doing, again, I'm not going to cover everything we're doing, but I just want to highlight some things that I think is important to student success. We're focused on inquiry-based science. where students are learning through questioning why and the teacher facilitating scientific exploration instead of just giving students answer. Having them do more hands-on laboratories. Their lectures are more why-based and leading students to the answers rather than just handing them the answer. Again, we talked talked about spiraling fair game standards, and basically what that means is anything that's taught in 3rd grade can be assessed in 5th grade. Anything taught in 6th grade can be assessed in 8th grade. So our teachers, as part of our staff development, has been giving them strategies how to incorporate those strategies into their existing lessons. So students are constantly going back and making sure they don't forget those standards that they learned previously. And that was one of the big things why Crystal River Middle School saw a big jump this past year. They really, one of their teachers sort of took the science department and really focused on spiraling those standards. And then what we had, Mr. Crowley led a staff development where he brought all the science teachers, the 8th grade science teachers in the county together with that teacher from Crystal River Middle School to talk about spiraling and how that works. So we're hoping to see this year more of that spiraling, more of the effective spiraling with all the middle schools, and hoping to see that bigger jump just like Crystal River Middle School had this past year.
Who's the teacher at Crystal River Middle?
Miss Pope, Sandy Pope. We're also, because of the science test involves so much reading, we're incorporating more reading strategies in the science classes, and we're asking some of our ELA teachers to take some of that nonfiction content and teach the reading process with that nonfiction content. And you also saw Lecanto High School had very nice biology scores, and one of the things that we pulled away from having collaborative discussion was that they have a dedicated text that goes along with the curriculum map that infuses reading throughout. So we felt like that was an important part of why Lecanto High School had some success, and more success in biology is because of the infusion of reading. They also did one other thing too that the other schools started to do this year is, and I'm going to get to that later, but is pairing that environmental science class with the biology course. They had done that, which makes it basically a year-long course that the standards for environmental science and biology overlap each other, and they can go deeper. And the environmental standards require that you do more hands-on experiments. So we're mimicking that at our other 2 high schools in some degree or fashion.
1 second, I want to see if Mr. Dodd had a question.
No.
Expect lots of questions. Okay. Go ahead, sorry.
So we've done a lot of sharing of best practices. We've identified those teachers that had the success at the middle and high school. Elementary schools, 11 points above the state average. They've been doing the inquiry-based science for a while. They seem to have a pretty good handle on that. The next slide, hands-on experiences. I think we've always been pretty proud of our hands-on experiences in science in Citrus County. We're still the 4th and 7th grade students taking those trips to the Marine Science Station. We also have those biology courses in high school. And this year, a few of our AP classes at the high school level actually went out to the Marine Science Station to do field experiments or field laboratories to enhance that curriculum. We also, this year, Duke has partnered with us to give our 5th grade students an experience about energy and electricity. 5th grade students are going to go out to the Duke energy plant. It's my understanding half of them will get a tour of the plant while the other half works on hands-on types of experiments or hands-on material where they're learning about electrical current and how energy is produced, and then those groups will flip and the other one will do the tour and the other will do the hands-on. So we're getting some practical experiences right here in Citrus County of the energy process and the electrical process. Okay. And then last but definitely not least is our science fair, authentic science experience. We find science fair to be valuable. Our community heavily supports it. Our medical community, our waterways organizations, and our energy companies all come out to support the science fair. It is an authentic hands-on experience for the students. And so again, that's another important part.
Mr. Rowland, on the science fair, well, I've been on the board, I know we've looked at this a couple of times. We've restructured it where we no longer go to the international science fair, which I'm generally supportive of that direction for sure. But I wonder, as we look at it, it seems like each year it's harder and harder to get kids always participating in it. I can tell you I've had now my kids participate at the elementary, middle, and high school levels. And the challenge is, and this is not just as a parent, but also from what I hear from the teachers, is the paperwork's getting more and more challenging. And unless that child has an involved parent in their life, it's really rigorous to get done. And I'm wondering if we should explore the fact of restructuring it and either, changing the direction of either maybe it's an option to get into that side of it, but we put a lot of emphasis on the science method and doing experiments based on that and not necessarily that meet the national criteria. Or maybe we relook at the whole thing. And I'm not thinking it from a budget, but a participation. Because the more kids we can, the elementary level, I think it's still, there's a fun involvement to it. You get classroom, involvement. Sometimes they're doing a project. You'll get a lot of, paired involvements. And there's still an element where the teacher can just have a student do a project in class, and they may have learned the scientific methods then. In middle school, it changes. And by high school, it's, we just have a reduction. Even our IB participation has gone down. I think pretty much the main schools of the high schools that percentage-wise would be AES and I think Pope John Paul. Well, they don't have high school, but I was thinking of the middle school. But AES is probably percentage-wise still the heavy involved high school. So I don't know if the board has any thinking on that, but
I think Citrus is very involved. I participate in their science every year.
And their numbers are okay, but your high school section has gotten smaller and smaller at the fairgrounds. And I think what I keep thinking is how do we do to keep kids participating in science fair? That's to me one of the things, because it's a very positive experience. But if the paperwork gets to a point where unless that child has another, I know my own son last year did one project. We had to have a scientist and a medical doctor sign off on the project. Now, I don't know how many kids would have been, and it actually wasn't a very complicated project. But you'd have, unless they have that, they're not going to necessarily be able to do that.
Yeah, I think it's worth more conversation. I know some of the things that we did this year. I know as we transitioned from Ms. Boley to Mr. Crowley, they set up a lot of individual meetings at campuses and even had some parent nights where they made themselves available for parents to come in, because we realize that paperwork can be complex. So we're providing more guidance and more opportunities and more interaction with our TOSAs and at the school level, but it's still complicated. You're right.
And I think the numbers, I think we have to just keep monitoring those numbers, because if we're trending, with reduced participation, then I think that, we have to look at, are we going in the right direction? So I just think it's a great experience, and I appreciate, because Mr. Crawley's, it's a new change for him. So this has nothing to do with that. It's
Right.
really just, we kind of took a step back from international because we were trying to see whether that, and I'm wondering if we need to just, I think it's just something you all to.
And I think we, to reiterate what you're saying, I think we recognized that last year is like, wow, these numbers are down a little bit. And that's where we said, well, what can we do? So we put some things in place to help build those up. And like you said, we'll see how that works out this year. But it's worth, as we have those science department meetings or the meeting at the elementary school, that's worth a discussion for sure. Some of the things that we did for instructional design and tools, we had to create pacing guides for that environmental science and biology paired class. So the high schools got together this past summer. They shared best practices, but they talked about and looked at what Lecanto High School was doing as far as their pacing guide. And so they recreated that all the schools can use. I know at the middle school level, there was some question And Amy might, if she wants to add anything, but there were some questions about the EOTs and test specs and matching those up. So the research and accountability went back in, met with those middle school science teachers, made sure you had a good pairing of the standards and test time specifications to match, what was expected on the end of course tests for 8th grade. Continuing to use formative assessment tools. And really, it's just really the technology. The iPads have created a great resource for the science courses because you can do so many virtual experiments. All of our schools are using those. Some of our schools have purchased the Google Cardboard, and that's where you put like the goggles on, and you can go in and see a human heart in 3D. You can see other things in 3-dimensional. So the technology is helping our kids have, I wouldn't call it hands-on experience because it's not, but it's a truly a virtual experience that is mimicking reality. So that's a very positive thing. And last but not least,
Technology people haven't today, one of these days, they need to bring in the VR for the board members to see, because I don't think they can truly appreciate it unless they got those goggles on.
yeah, I mean, it truly is, and we're very fortunate to be able to offer that to our students. And all the, we have Study On, and I said that we have other formative assessment tools that teachers are using to gauge student success and another way of student practice. And then the last thing, and they don't want to get into textbooks, but the current adoption expires in 2017, so at that time we will begin looking at the new science curriculum.
Wow, is it that time again?
Really,
It feels like we just did it.
All
His
right.
doc's going, yep.
Feels that way.
Hey, good afternoon. I'm going to share with you our K-12 math kind of focus on mathematics. And as you can see, our math standards are the Math Florida standards, and you may hear them referred to by teachers as the MAFs, M-A-F-S. This is just a screenshot of what you can find if you went into CPOMS, and it's an opportunity for teachers and parents to go in and look how they're laid out on grade level standards, domain clusters, and standards. And it's all listed, and there's links and resources available for teachers to use and access.
I think you have a link too somewhere on the district site to this for parents and teachers.
We do as well. Standards for mathematical practice. This is what all of our math courses are based on. I'm not going to read those to you, but you can see those are some of the pieces and parts of what we expect our students to do as they go through the courses. And I made something, if you're familiar with a Wordle, this is called a Wordle, which is basically putting all of those standards into something. And if you see some of the key words that pop out, students, mathematics, problem, proficient, arguments, reasoning, and just to let you know, and I share this with parents, nowhere in there do you see the big word popping out, memorization. Because when we talk about mathematics, we're talking about how kids problem solve and how kids reason. And the big words that we're looking at is, those are the words listed of what students have to be able to do. And so,
I'm sorry, you had persevere on the screen before, I gotta pick up that.
Yes.
And that, you
Yeah.
have to.
And the kids need, students need to be able to do that. So, as we,
Who are using the Wordles? Where are these happening?
well, anybody can do it. It's actually free. You can go online, you take a piece of text, and you can put it in, and then it pops out with what are the most common words that are used. So it's just a great way. We've done it with names, like a person's name and information about. So if I took something about Thomas and wrote all that, then the big words that identify Thomas would
Do
come
you have
up.
to have the program in your computer?
Nope, it's free. It's online. Just Wordle.com.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. This is just our elementary math curriculum. We use Go Math, and you can see the textbooks that we've adopted. This is our core curriculum. Again, teachers use other resources available, but these are the resources that are available to them. This is our middle school curriculum, and just to kind of share how that works, you see grade 6, grade 7, and grade 8 mathematics is what is the main core curriculum, but we also have what we call an advanced grade 6. So if a student's in 5th grade and is doing acceleration, so that 5th grader says, I'm going to be accelerated, in 5th grade they would take the 6th grade advanced, and 6th grade advanced is all of grade 6 and half of grade 7. That student then, when they hit 7th grade, would take the 7th grade advanced, which is the other half of grade 7 and all of grade 8. And then when they hit into 8th grade, that student would then take Algebra 1. Some students who are advanced might take Algebra 1 in 7th grade and Geometry in 8th grade. So we do have those few students that have that opportunity to take that. But this is our progression for providing acceleration. And there's collaboration between the elementary and the middle school when that happens. Mr. Rowland and I have conversation, and then we also create that conversation and dialogue across levels between the elementary principal, guidance counselor, and the secondary middle school principal and guidance counselor. So the students are on track. Once a student has accelerated, say in elementary school, if they're taking advanced math, they then continue on that track. They don't go backwards. So once they get into that higher level course, they continue moving through.
And there's some, because they didn't have this quite when my son did one version, my daughter got to do this version. And the success seemed to be, if you were a 5th grader going into the 6th grade, you basically got the curriculum leading up to algebra. Where if you were a 6th grader and then we screened them for algebra, they basically had to skip again at that point.
Yes.
And that seems to be, and it's not to say they're not successful, but then it seemed like there was sometimes some intervention to provide those holes or to fill those holes.
Right, and this is really designed to make sure when the students accelerated that we make sure, and we have a whole process that we go through for acceleration. So students are receiving any of those holes that they may see, that the teachers then provide that, whether on the sending end or on the receiving end. So
We're still using the screener tool. I'm trying to think of the name of it.
Orleans Hannah.
Thank you. And that still seems, that was a pretty good predictor of the algebra. Is that still?
I believe that's still
Yes,
used.
it is.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Rowland.
Thank you. Okay. And then this is our high school curriculum. You can see, I'm sorry, the font's a little smaller, but those are all the different variety of courses that are offered for our students at the high school level, grades 9 through 12, and those are the adopted textbooks that are used for the students. This is a snapshot of our Citrus County Math website. Beverly Tidwell, who you're going to get to hear in a little bit, is going to talk to you about mathematics, and she oversees that website. You can see the variety of resources available for our elementary, middle, and high school. She has information on Math Field Day. She has information on the Math Florida Standards. And just to note, it says Common Core, but as you know, the Math Florida Standards are based off of the Common Core standards. So many of the resources that are out there are based on those as well. And so this is available. Katie also has this linked on our elementary site, so teachers can access it that way as well. Our resources and tools, Beverly's been working very closely with our teachers to develop some of the resources, timelines. At the elementary level, we use math modules. We had some updates that we made last year, so everything's available digitally. If a teacher wants to find something, it's 2 in the morning, they say, I wonder what I'm going to do, and I'm looking for some resources. They can go online, access it, click on the link, and find it. Gone are the days of teachers having to tote all those books home to review. It's all done electronically, and they can access it and look at it electronically.
Mr. Hebert, you
yeah.
said something, and just to make sure that we remember, on the Common Core, am I correct? Common Core or Florida Standards are only still in Florida in math and ELA. We're still using Next Generation or Sunshine State Standards at all the other subject areas. So when we get that pushback about Florida Standards / Common Core, there's still only 2 subject areas that we're doing those in. And we didn't choose them.
And when
We're just facilitating what the state has chosen.
And when the state moved to the Florida Standards, they gathered, public input and were able to embed many of their own pieces and parts into what they wanted and were important. But for example, Common Core ELA does not have handwriting embedded into it. However, the Florida Standards does, and we do have, guidelines and maps and things available for teachers to use for teaching that subject. I know we're not on language arts, but
No,
just,
and same with history, social studies, we don't have Common Core as a part of that, which has been probably one of the most controversials nationally in some of those areas, where we don't even have that as a standard. And I say that because occasionally, even right now in the political season, you guys are doing Common Core well in 2 subject areas. The rest of what we teach is our old standards.
So anyway, you can see all the resources that we have available. We have curriculum tools available. You mentioned FloridaStudents.org is a great site that's available. One thing that Mrs. Tidwell does to help our parents understand the mathematical practices, once a month she provides schools with a math tip on understanding the mathematical practices and provides that to all the schools. They embed that in their newsletters, on their websites, and it's a way for parents to better understand that. These are the types of assessments that we have embedded, and you can see that summative assessments you're probably most familiar with, and Mrs. Krause shared those. Those are all of our FSA or state assessments. The district has interim assessments that are created and used by our district folks in some, not all subjects, but it depends on the school and the subject area, but those assessments they have to use. And then those formative assessments are the ones that really help drive that instruction daily. Those are the assessments that teachers help and say, here's where my student's lacking, here's what I need to do to move on. And those are the assessments that we have available for students. We also have supplementary programs available. You've heard of Success Maker, which is K-8, Study Island, which I know Mr. Rowland mentioned, which is K-8, and we have some pilots at the high school that are using Study Island. Fast Math, which is a K-8. We now have Math Nation, grades 6 to 12. This is something students can go in and teachers can use. Khan Academy, my children went through high school and algebra. I needed some assistance in helping with some of those higher level courses to refresh my brain, and that is a great site if you've not used it to show you how to do some of those higher level math subjects. And then the ALEX program, which is in our middle school geometry and high school algebra. That is a paid program that we use, the ALEX program, and that is helping to support our students in those two subject areas. Now I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Boyd.
Okay, good afternoon. So we've gone through the data, we've kind of given you the instructional design and the resources and given you a sense of that. And then the next part, we want to kind of give you that sense of what it looks like, what instruction looks like now. Mr. Hebert referenced Florida standards and mathematics. It's very different than what we used to do. So the thinking, as you saw in our State of the District Part 1, goes much deeper. The rigor is harder, and it's a little bit asking the students really to be able to think about their thinking and demonstrate their thinking. Well, the same thing starts coming in the development of mathematical concepts. Students really have to be able to conceptualize that information. So we'll have a little demonstration of what it looks like now. And in the science world, even though we are still in our Florida standards, it too has gotten more in depth. It's more of a problem-solving process and inquiry focus, so that our students are really being problem solvers and thinking things from that way. So I'll be bringing up for you in just a minute, we have Beverly Tidwell. She is our K-12 mathematics teacher on special assignment. And then following her will be Richard Crawley. He is our K-12 teacher on special assignment for science. And then following that presentation will be our technology and moving on further. So.
I find this approach requires more patience on the part of the learner, because we're used to right straight to it.
As a learner, the patience first for you as a learner, but then also as a teacher. What becomes challenging there is we want to rescue. It's very hard as educators to watch that struggle as students are struggling. And so one of the biggest phrases that I adopted as we made this shift in instruction was we have to honor the struggle. We have to be able to honor that with our students. And that's a tough thing to do as an educator. So it's patience on what we're asking our students to persevere in any aspect, whether it's the language arts, mathematics, or science, but it's also teachers having to let the students persevere and not try to rescue. So, good afternoon.
Okay, this is just an example of something that I got at one of my FAMS leadership conferences. It's the Florida Association of Math Supervisors, and we share things with each other. I've modified it a little bit, but to include like what some of the standards mean, and I guess it's NP enough it has fractions, but fractions aren't taught at K through 2, so that if a teacher's looking at it, they can tell what the standard means. But what I'm going to be looking at today is MD, the last column, and I'm going to look at third grade where you're going to be using rectangular arrays to figure out area. And this is called a coherence model. And they go from kindergarten through 8th grade, but I'm going to show you how elementary 3rd grade standard can go to algebra. So I'm going to bridge those two subjects together. All right. The 3rd grade standard we're going to be looking at is MAFS 3.MD 3.7, which relates area and operations of multiplication and addition. We're going to find the area of a rectangle, and we're going to tile it. We're going to multiply the side lengths and areas of the rectangle with whole number side lengths, and we're going to find the area inside with the rectangular areas. And we're going to be using areas with tiling, and it's going to be using the distributed property, and that's the A times B plus C to give you A times B and A times C, but they don't really use the distributed property name in there yet. Okay, so it's also going to recognize that area is additive. All right, so to get us started, we're going to use base 10 blocks, which are used very commonly in elementary school. These manipulatives help students understand addition, subtraction, number sense, place value, and counting. So we're going to start off with something that really helps students gain an amazing conceptual understanding for multiplication and area, and also just for counting, because it goes over one's unit and shows them base 10. It goes over the hundreds, and then it even goes into thousands, but I only went up to hundreds with y'all today. So this represents 1 unit by 1 unit. So 1 times 1 is 1 unit. And then this is 10 of them, so this represents 10 of these. So this is 10. And then this is 10 by 10, so its area is
100.
100. Okay, everybody's with me. All right. And I made a product map, so that I'm going to model this problem for you.
Mr. Weaver's using Khan categorizing.
What's the next question?
The next question is how you switch to spectrum.
Doc, can you switch the overhead to the cam?
Sure.
Oh, do I have to do all that?
He's setting my job.
Wow. Marcia would either be impressed or nervous.
Oh, because I did this. Sorry. That's my fault. In my classroom, I just had to come back and
It was there.
Don't be hard on
Oh, no.
Oh, there it is.
All right, we're going to model the problem 11 times 13. Get the little tiles here. So we have 10, and then we have one little tile, and then we have 10 and 3 little tiles. So modeling this, and I'm going to write the numbers down here. This would be 10 plus 1, and this is 10 plus 3. Okay? So 10 times 10 fills in, anytime you multiply two numbers together, you're getting an area. So it always makes a rectangle. So 10 times 10 is 100. So you fill in that shape. And then you do 10 times, this is a 1 tile. So 10 times 1 is 10. All right.
Ours is not fine either.
10 times 1, you're not multiplying by 3 even though I put 1s in. 10 times there's another 1 tile is 10. And then 10 times 1 is 10. And now we're going to multiply here. We have 1 tile times 10 is 10. And then what we have left is we have 1 times 1 is 1. And we have 1 times 1 is 1. And then you have 1 times 1 is 1. And we built an area model to represent the multiplication problem. So this answer of the product of 11 times 13 is inside the area of that rectangle. So our answer is, what is this? This shape is 100, and then these are tens, so we have 100 plus 10, 20, 30 plus 10, you're counting too fast. You're the advanced, you're the blooper. And then 1, 2, 3 plus 3. I'm writing it like this for a reason. Okay? So you have 100 and, what's it all together? 143. 143. The reason I wrote it like this is because you have what's called partial products. And in the elementary school, when they take their FSA, it will ask them for the partial products. And they have to be able to show that they can find them. So that's important that they can break it down like that. All right. Another thing that's important is when they start talking to students about what perfect squares are, if they show them that a perfect square actually makes a square, then that's really important too, because I can remember I didn't realize what a perfect square was. Just because they told me that 5 times 5 is 25, it's a perfect square. I didn't realize that shape made a perfect square. I just listened to my teacher and shook my head because I knew that's what I was supposed to do. Okay.
You were memorizing.
Huh?
You were memorizing.
Yeah, I
which was
memorized.
Instead of,
I didn't have the conceptual understanding.
right.
I didn't have the conceptual understanding of what a perfect square was, but I knew that I took the square root and I got 5, but I didn't really understand what the idea of the whole perfect square was. But if I would have done this with 5 units times 5 units, it made 25, and saw that they had the same length on each side and saw it was a perfect square, that would have given me the understanding of what a perfect square was. Okay, next, I'm going to go ahead and show you the other model without switching on here where we have this before touching it. Okay, so this is our one problem. Our next one's going to be with algebra. All right, and these are algebra tiles. And algebra tiles are more along the lines of what I'm used to. They're a little bit worn because I use them a lot as a teacher. But basically, this is not really, this is a teacher algebra tile that you can use on an overhead, is how old this one is. But they're normally like this, where they have 2 colors. This one is obviously an x squared. This one is an x, and this is negative x. This is x squared, and this is negative x squared. And when you put them up next to each other, they can see it's an unknown times an unknown. So it gives you x squared. It can be any variable. We're just going to call it x. And then this is just 1 unit. And the ones that our students have yellow on one side and red on the other, so positive 1 and negative 1. I just have the positive ones because the little ones fill out of my little bag. So, okay. So here we go. We're going to, I'm going to model a problem. And some of you that were good at algebra might remember seeing a problem that looked like this. All right, so x plus 1 times x plus 3. All right, I'm going to model this problem with algebra tiles. So we have the x times the x and we have a plus 3 and we have the x plus 1. Okay? So x plus 1 and x plus 3. So when I multiply this together, x times x is x squared.
Pretty good.
And then if I do x times 1 here, I get
No, that's
x. And if I multiply x times 1 here, I get
X.
x. And if I multiply x times 1, I get x. And if I multiply x times 1, I get x. 1 times 1, 1. 1 times 1 is 1. And then 1 times 1, 1. So our answer is in the rectangle that we just made. So our answer is not the problem that's on the outside, it's in our answer, just this rectangle. Okay, so look at the question. So what is our answer? What do we have? What's this term called?
X squared.
X squared. And then we have x, we have 3x's, and we have plus 3. Now, are these the same shape and size as this one? No, so we can't add these to this one, right? That's one thing I teach my students to start with before I even start adding like terms or solving equations or other things with it, is I teach them what are like terms. You can easily see that an x squared is not the same as an x, as I try to add those together. But when you add this together, your final answer is x squared plus 4x plus 3. But you can see the partial products in this. Compare that to the one that we just solved. Can you see both of them at the same time? What do you notice about those? If I wrote 100 plus, or what if I wrote it here, 100 plus 10 plus 30 plus 3.
That's the same number.
And then what did we get here? We got 143, so we got 100 plus 40 plus 3, right? So what would x represent? 10. Isn't that neat? Well, how do you switch this back to the computer?
Ms. Tidwell, with this, I think, the one thing that we sometimes get from one, frustrated parents, that they're trying to figure out, well, this isn't the math that we used to have, blah, 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 is that it goes back to the standard of not trying to simply memorize. And it's a question, really, but rather for them to have a manipulative understanding that really has a deeper knowledge of figuring the problem out. And which, to me, is really old school, even though now we're saying it's Common Core or it's a new math. It seems like in a lot of ways, it's reverting back to making sure that our students understand how to solve the problem rather than just simply memorizing an answer. We're not expecting kids to do their checkbooks in these methods, but we're expecting them to have an understanding of those manipulatives so that, like you said, when you talk about a square number, when you talk about what that really means, as opposed to just simply being, well, it's 25. Is that correct?
It gives you a concrete understanding to an abstract problem. You're having a geometric representation to an algebra problem. So it makes it for a lot clearer understanding for students, especially our students that are sitting in Algebra 1A and 1B. If they have this understanding, or they have teachers teaching with algebra tiles and manipulatives, and if they've had this understanding since since elementary school is what I'm trying to show here, and they've had teachers using manipulatives and going on through middle school with them, and they have this conceptual understanding, then it should be easier to then use algebra tiles with them to get them through algebra, because this will go as far as completing the square. I know I was with a teacher from Citrus High School at SCTM this weekend, and she was so excited about, she learned how to complete the square with algebra tiles. And I'm like, yeah, they do great things. So, it's just really neat, some of the things. And I did Ames last year with some teachers that they hadn't seen how to use algebra tiles before, and they were excited at things that you could do with them. So part of it's getting the knowledge out there and how to use them. But the students are really the ones that are going to benefit, because those are the types of students that have to have different ways to learn. Their parents might complain that they're learning with hands-on or something different, but they're the kids that need something different in order to learn, because they're not getting it with just numbers thrown at them. They need something hands-on to help them.
Great. Thank you. That was great.
This was the standard that it was tied to in high school. It's just polygons that are form a system analogous to integers. They're closed under addition, subtraction, multiplication. And then I showed you algebra tiles, and I talked about how those form, but I didn't want to switch it back and forth. And then these are the comparison, where they're pretty much the same product. They show you the same thing. And at Ames, they don't use base 10 blocks. They use like some foam things. And they do this even with the algebra tiles, the same as this. So it's kind of neat. The mathematical practices, this is an example of what some that I let teachers borrow or send to them to use in the elementary and secondary classrooms. And just for Mr. Hebert, I made a sentence with this Wordle, and hopefully this will impress my mother. All right. The Wordle, what it's supposed to do is the words that are bigger are the words that are in there the most. And since it was the mathematical practices, and I was really impressed that, I hadn't seen it done with the mathematical practices. Mathematically proficient students use mathematical arguments, reasoning, and tools to solve problems. 15 words, and I used to do that with my math students, and they could, it's a dime a word, and they had to summarize in 15 words or less, and it was a dime a sentence or something, or a dime a word, and so that was a language strategy. There you go. I think that was my last one. Yes. Oh, no, it's not. Oh, FCAT versus FSA. FCAT used to only ask multiple choice, but now we have all these different types. So, and it does ask a lot more of the students than just multiple choice, because now they still have multiple choice, but they have multi-select, grid action, open response, and I'm going to show you an example of one like what we just did with third grade.
Have more time.
The time, if they need more time, it normally lets them have more time, yes. This was an FCAT NGSS example, where it was just like what we were doing, where they were going to find the product of 9 times 8, and they had to see which one's equivalent. So it was A was the answer, very similar to what we just did to find it. But on the practice test for third grade, this is like an example of a model, but it's an open response, and you had to create an expression that could be used to find the area of the part. It did not ask you to find the answer. So it wanted them to just find an expression, and an expression doesn't have equal signs. So they would mark wrong if the student put an equal sign in there. So it's really big on that, and that's one of the things I'm going to talk to the TOSAs about. And then this was just an example for algebra, just to show that algebra really didn't have proofs in it before. They might show like a step problem and ask what was a mistake, but now they have proofs in algebra where you have to say what finishes the proof, or some questions you have to complete the proof. And that was, I believe, my last slide. Yeah. Okay, it's nice talking to you. Hopefully you learned something.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you have problems with children throwing those things?
They have virtual ones also,
Oh, good.
but not when I was in class. I've taught with
Good afternoon. Beverly, thank you. As a teacher who spent 10 years teaching math in elementary and middle school, I used those blocks almost every day. That was a really cool little trip down memory lane. I'd like to talk to you today about science instruction, particularly the scientific method and the nature of science. Most people are fairly familiar with the scientific method. They could pick out some of the main headings of it and whatnot. It's described pretty thoroughly here on the graphic that you see above. And to really do this method justice, you're really talking about an authentic science experience for our students. You know, as a science teacher, that's my goal. My goal is to develop lesson plans that are authentic experiences for my students, to place my students in the shoes of real scientists. Now, unfortunately, that can't be done by simply reading a textbook. That can't be done by, even though it's very beneficial, it can't be done by having them engage in complete step-by-step structured labs that the outcomes are predetermined. You know, that's not gonna fulfill that authentic science experience. Now, I'm not saying that reading science text and learning and gaining experience in the tools and methods that scientists use doesn't have value. In fact, I'm saying quite the opposite. I'm saying those are huge pieces of the bigger picture. In fact, if you look at our science standards, and in particular looking at the first one there, SC5N11, you're going to see science skills that you would expect to see in a science standard, like plan and carry out scientific investigations. You're going to see science words that are really easy to pick up on, that they're science words, like observations, experiments, variables, making predictions. What you're also going to see, though, are math skills, like collecting and organizing data, interpreting data on charts and tables and graphs. You're also going to see ELA connections, like analyzing information. And at the very end of that first one, which I think is one of the biggest things that is the most important, but is also one of the things that gets skipped a lot in our instruction, is defending conclusions. And if you look further down that slide, SC5N21 and big idea number 2, there's another example of an ELA connection there where it says explanations must always be linked with evidence. So when our science standards ask our students to analyze and defend their conclusions, we can find that in our ELA standard number 1 under writing. The very first yellow block, where it says write arguments to support claims in an analysis of substantive topics or text using valid reasoning and relevant and sufficient evidence. When our science standards ask our students to go and link their explanations to evidence, that's directly described in our reading standard number 1, where it says read closely to determine what the text says explicitly and make logical inferences from it, cite specific textual evidence when writing or speaking to support conclusions drawn from the text. Now in science, our text could actually be literature, or it could be the data that we collect during an experiment. Either way, we are doing exactly what our ELA teachers do. We're asking our students to cite text evidence. And I think it's really important to notice that connection between those two things. So in an attempt to address our science standards, we must also address our ELA standards and math standards. We must recognize that science by its nature is a process that requires students to not only engage in authentic science content, but to also read, research, perform mathematical operations, organize and communicate ideas, which again can't simply be done just by reading text or simply by doing step-by-step predetermined labs. We're talking about inquiry-based instruction, and today I'd like to provide you with a brief overview of professional development that I facilitated back in August with all of our 5th grade teachers throughout the county, and it's called a model of illicit activity. You have an example of it right there. It's a letter that comes from a fictitious company, and this company's name is Tech. They are writing to the team of scientists, our students, and asking them to figure out a design manufacturing process, to figure out a way to make it better. So Tech makes these computers, and their claim is that they're way more powerful than any other computer out there, and they have an issue that their computer chips are overheating, which is obviously causing the computers to shut down. They've asked the students, the super team of scientists, to figure out which liquids would be the best to use as a coolant so that this no longer happens, thus improving their product, and they can sell a lot and make a lot of money. And if you look at the very last statement in the letter from Tech, your team is tasked with determining which liquid has the fastest cooling rate and developing a proposal with your recommendations based on your data. That basically is the math and ELA connection part right there. They are going to have to read, they're going to have to research, they're going to have to pull in articles about liquids and cooling rates, depending if we're in elementary, middle, or high school, you know, that would get a little more depth, but they're going to have to perform some sort of an experiment which is open-ended, and they do it on their own, and the teacher really just facilitates and guides and doesn't say, these are the liquids, I want you to test them this way. Then at the end, the ELA, another ELA connection is the proposal. They have to write a formal proposal which says, we find that this is the best liquid to use for a coolant, and here are our reasons why. We're going back into the text that we read, the research that we read, we're going back into the data that we collected, and we're citing evidence to tell you, Tech, which is the best liquid to use. This next page is the instructions that I gave to our teachers that day. Now, these were elementary school teachers, most of which had never really done a model of illicit activity before at MEA. So in these directions, there were a little bit more spoon feeding, if you will, of how to do this lab. And again, I only had an hour and a half to do this with our teachers versus the 3 to 4 days I would do this with students. So I literally told them, okay, what you're going to do is use a thermometer, you're going to drip dry, but I still left the open-ended part about communicating your results and writing a proposal up to the teachers. Because ultimately at the end, that's that whole defending your claim, your stance piece. I included some pictures of the day just to show you what the teachers went through. Not that it was horrible to say that they went through it. They all seemed to really enjoy it. There was tons of free choice where the teachers could choose the liquids that they wanted to use. They had to create tables to record their data after they performed their experiments. They then had to transfer that data to some sort of graph. And if you notice in the top right picture and the bottom left and the center picture, they're all using a line graph. But in the bottom right picture, they're using a bar graph, which, believe it or not, is absolutely what happens with our students too. There's a misconception there. Some of our teachers weren't really sure which type of graph to use. Now you're talking about something cooling over time, that's a line graph, a change over time. The group that used the bar graph, we didn't call them out and tell them they were wrong, but it was a teachable moment that they created that identified to me, but that group had a misconception. And then they got to choose what they felt was the liquid that was the best. And they all the groups actually chose different liquids, believe it or not, because some of them, their data was, this one cooled off the fastest, so that's why we chose it. But some of them looked at it as, this one took the longest to cool off, and they understood a little bit more about the energy that a liquid can hold, so they said, that means it's going to heat up the slowest too, which means it'll evaporate the slowest, which means there'll be more liquid left to cool that as it's going around that. So there were multiple conversations with our teachers, all of which are correct, by the way. There is no actual answer to this one. I mean, there is Scientifically, water would be the best one of those, but we use it. It was just neat to see that in an hour and a half, adults coming up with the same exact issues, the same exact misconceptions, and the same exact results, different results that our students would get. So it's,
Where was this?
this was out at Forest Ridge Elementary School. It was on the PD Day, August 31st, when the storm came to town.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was that day. And it was fun. There was about 60 adults there that day, and they were broken into groups. And there was the ELA teachers were there, the math teachers were there, and by the end of the day, they were all science teachers, and it was pretty fun to see that. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Board. Good afternoon, Mr. Mullen. The next part of our presentation will be given by our teacher on special assignments, focusing on the integration of technology. We were fortunate this year to be able to provide these positions. They are funded through Title I and through our Digital Learning Grant. They work very closely with our TOSAs, focusing on our content areas, math, science, language arts, reading. They work closely with our teachers in providing staff development. They also model lessons with our students. And finally, they work with our parents as well on blended learning. We know that teaching and learning has changed, and these positions have been instrumental in supporting our schools. So with that, I'd like to introduce Dan Koch, Megan Jones, and Diana Goolsby.
Good afternoon. We're kind of all three just going to jump in here where we think is appropriate, but I just wanted to say that we're thankful that we got this opportunity to have this type of a position. It kind of just allows us to explore a lot of the things we're doing already in the classroom with our iPad initiative, with a lot of the technology that we had at our disposal, because we kind of get to see it from a different vantage point. I was in the middle school, Ms. Jones was in the elementary school, and Ms. Goolsby was in the middle school as well. But now we get to travel around the county and see just the different uses of technology and get like a more holistic view. So it's been very beneficial.
Why do you get the cool picture?
Why do I get the cool picture?
I mean, you could have done your colleagues, and you could have mocked one up for them.
The next time I
That request has been placed.
Yes, it's in the holster. I actually did that on the iPad, by the way, so we'll get a chance to talk about that. Digital Learning Day, that's something that we started, I believe, last year, and this year was the second iteration of that. It's a great opportunity. This year we had Pam Stewart come by and talk to us about her views on technology and how it's influenced education. There's just some pictures there that we took. These are all pictures that were taken by, who took these pictures? I think Mr. Gagnon took these, but they're kind of like there's a whole bunch of people that gave me some of these pictures. A lot of different sessions that were available. These are all teachers that did this by their own volition. They just wanted to share what they were doing in their own classrooms, how technology has benefited them. And this day was just excellent. It's really cool to hear the feedback from teachers about how it's just a non-threatening way to get technology instruction and talk to your peers about how it's being used in the classroom instead of going to like a conference type of situation where you're hearing from other stakeholders and not necessarily people that are in your county and seeing the same things. So it's really been excellent.
This middle one was from the primary.
I believe so, yeah. And here's just a couple of the different photos from the different sessions there. You can see a lot of them were like standing room only. They were packed to the gills with people that just wanted to know about technology. Last year, we started, one of the initiatives we started with Ms. Douglas and myself and a couple other people that were involved were these family university nights, where it was kind of an invitation for parents to come by and families and be involved with just the technology that's going on in schools. So it was a non-threatening way for parents to come in and learn about what the teachers were doing with the students in that particular class. But the feedback that we got was family university was a little bit intimidating for parents in terms of what they were going to find out that night. So we had a couple of meetings this year, and a couple of name changes kind of went through the pipeline. One of them was how we're going to get parents in, how we're going to get them involved, and one of the names was Tech Tailgate, I think. But we said, let's nix that one because we don't want to encourage anybody to bring anything to Star Tech night. But we eventually, interesting tidbit, this night, Star Tech was something that, as we were having this meeting, I was sitting in the meeting room and I said, why don't I just ask some of my followers on Twitter, I said, what do you guys think? Here's actually what we're planning on doing. What's your thought on what we should call this thing? And within 5 minutes, I got a response. And this was the night, this was the name that someone pitched to me, and I thought this was an excellent idea. So I pitched it to Ms. Douglas, and she said, why don't we just go with that? So we called it Star Tech Night. Lots of excellent feedback from parents. They know exactly what they're going to experience when they come. Teachers, just like Digital Learning Day, they volunteer to show up that night. It's usually around a 2-hour session where they go through a bunch of different sessions with parents, whether it be Skyward, whether it be just a big why piece, why are we using technology in schools, kind of quell that little bit of apprehension that parents have of, what's happening, why are you banning paper and pencil, why is it all digital? And that's absolutely not the case. We're not throwing pencil and paper out the window. It is not banned from schools just because we have technology. And just offering a couple of guidance pieces for parents, even if it's something as simple as, hey, when the devices go home with the students, you're still allowed to be a parent. You can take the device away if you deem it necessary. There's some parents that don't think that they can do that. But we've had an excellent, not just feedback, but excellent participation from teachers, and we've even had a couple of students run student-led sessions. Citrus High School just had an excellent one, and where it was students that were in Mr. Swiatek's Coding Academy class, where they were doing their own personal projects that had to do with coding and a whole bunch of excellent stuff. So they exemplified those things that they were doing over there. Oh yeah, and Citrus County Education Foundation provides a little bit of money also, so they can purchase things like food for the families and things like that, sometimes with prizes. Feed them and they will come. Feed them at the end so they stay. We learned that through experience. So Citrus Tech Line is something else that's new. I believe it started last year as well. These are a couple of the different flyers that have gone out for the different schools, and this is also teachers that are kind of after hours manning some phone lines, and it's a simple flip phone. There's no real technology going on outside of that. There's a number that's given out, and parents or students can call, and if they're having technology woes at home, like they can't connect to their home Wi-Fi, what are the different steps, someone will be on the other end of the line to kind of talk them through that.
And the teachers just volunteer their time, is that right?
There's some teachers that have said, I'm willing to do this, and I believe they get a stipend for it outside of, it's not just a volunteer basis.
Does that come under the Title I budget?
Yes. Very good.
So, I mean, again, that's been, I believe we started it at Lecanto Middle School last year, and that's just been expanded to a bunch more schools this year, and it's been beneficial to parents that have, they're willing to accept the technology at home, but they're not necessarily, this safety net is just one more thing for them to buy into.
The Tech Line, are they at home, or are they at the school? I mean, because I'm thinking you could be at home and no one would know any different if you were...
It's a cell phone, it's a flip phone.
Oh, so they could be anywhere and do that? Okay.
Yes, they're not manning.
Let me clarify.
Sure.
Last year, we did utilize a flip phone. Mr. Chamberlain assisted us this year. Parents are given a fake number, and it connects directly to their cell phone. So whatever number is advertised, it goes directly to their cell phone.
So they, I know what they're using. They're using an app that actually uses that thin client that comes over and runs it. Yeah.
Actually, so
that's
it's basically
awesome.
just a masking app that it'll direct to their phone. So that's even better.
Yes.
And if you guys want to push me out of the bag, this is something that I will be the first person to admit to you. When I was a media specialist last year, I taught ELA at Citrus Springs Middle School for about 6 or 7 years, and then the year before I left that school to have this job, I was the media specialist there, and I also taught the morning show class, which is our digital production class, and I was the yearbook advisor. But there was a big push when I would go to conferences about makerspaces, and I would hear this every year, makerspace, and makerspace. And I said, what is that? Is it just an area that people go play with Legos at school? Because people are not going to buy into that. That is not something that, it sounds educational to me. So the more I looked into it, it is guided play that is standards based. If that clarifies it all. And I needed the clarification myself because it just sounded like a bunch of toys in a bin that students would just play with during the day. But if you see some of these pictures here, a lot of the schools have used grant money to buy things like Spheros, which are little programmable spherical robots. I'm not sure if you can really make it up, but there's a couple of students there with a laptop that's open, and they're using something called a Makey, which is a little tiny circuit board that you can plug into the computer with a USB cable. And all of these different things, they're not just toys, but they tie in excellently to the STEM standards and the math and science standards. So science, technology, engineering, math standards, all the things that we're teaching in schools have to do with coding. There's an excellent program that Sphero has. I believe it's called Sphero Spark, and it's something that we downloaded on all the devices at Citrus Springs Middle School. And it's not just driving these little spherical balls around the media center. I would provide challenges to them. So that's that screen in the media center, the blue one on the bottom right. What you see Xander doing down there with tape is he is building a maze on the ground, and his instructions were to drive the Sphero around that, program it, and he uses the programming language that is built in, and he has to do a little bit of coding to make the Sphero drive itself and not hit any of the walls. That actually takes a lot of critical thinking. They worked in groups here, and we offered some prizes to the people that were, and we had judges and things like that, so it was, sure.
I come from a fifth grade classroom and love being in this position, but makerspaces and STEM and STEAM projects are my passion. And so I started doing computer coding through the Hour of Code in our classroom. It's a free program, happens for 1 week every December, although the program is offered year-round for free online. Very happy to say that many of our elementary and middle schools are going to participate again this year, and I'll be out there with them. But I have never seen a student sit for an hour on a single math problem and then jump out of their seat when they finally get it. But I saw that with coding, and so when we see like the Wordle that was put up, when we talk about the science and this process of inquiry and coming back to your hypothesis again and again and not giving up, that persistence, those are the standards we're addressing when we talk about makerspaces and STEM and STEAM. And so to support these are to support the very foundations of the current educational expectations. To see a fifth grader knock their chair over because they finally got a coding program to work and not even realize that they were using ELA math and science standards during that process is phenomenal. And to see that with students of all ability levels, because STEM really, in makerspaces, they really touch on those pieces of creativity that are still within children that sometimes we can't hit in the other content areas. So these aren't just specials, these aren't just, fine arts. These are core content pieces that are really helping our students understand our math, science, and ELA standards.
I'm a big fan of makerspaces. I mean, if you go to, Citrus Springs Elementary's media lab, and Canto Primary, and they're all over. I remember seeing them and going, oh, this is cool. This is like what John Mullen used to have at Crystal River Middle School. And it's true, 20 years ago, John Mullen built what we think of now as a makerspace, but it was that. And so I remember thinking then, oh my gosh, he basically took shop and got rid of it and said, we need, modern tools with that kind of thinking, problem solving. And so I see it now, it's like, John's dream of having that is elsewhere. So, John, you are again on a cutting edge if you're watching, and we're grateful of it. These are amazing. And the only problem is trying to get yourself or your child away from a makerspace lab, because it's hard.
Absolutely, and it really is with guided practice too. There's times where if they're in the media center, like during lunch, I would let them come in. And if they wanted to just experiment with the Spheros, I would let them. But a lot of times the teachers would schedule time to come in, and we'd have full-fledged lessons with them with these challenges and stuff. I think it's important to kind of note that with these things, there's a very basic way to use them, and there's a very advanced way to use them. And there's a quote that I keep saying to people over and over, and I did not coin this, but digital allows us to do something different, and it really does. And it actually provides us with a huge buffet of tools, but for the most part, people see it and they're eating the napkins of the buffet. They're not really getting into the meat of it. So you can use these tools. Yes, you can drive the Spheros around and it's a toy, but you can also you can drill down into the different standards that we're already teaching our students and make them very, very viable.
Did you coin the buffet of tools?
No, I stole that one too. It's from, if you're doing any research, there's this educator, brilliant, his name is Kevin Honeycutt. And he has a million phrases on his website that are, they're all tweetable, so. I'm not sure if this is gonna work. This is a video But what you guys see here is, I'm not sure all of the different schools that have this technology, but this is something called an Ozobot. And I believe they're drawing with whiteboard markers on a table here. And what these will do is they will, if you put them on top of a line that you've drawn, it will follow the line around, and you can program it to do a whole bunch of different things. So they're like little kind of small Sphero robots, but let me see if this will play.
And you can color code sections of the line to get the Sphero to move faster, slower, spin.
Dr. Geddes, no.
So, yeah, that's okay. Video, it's a YouTube video, so we're kind of just, we're gonna skip it. But you would see if I were to play this. These these Ozobots that are kind of following this line around, and yes, you can color code them to do a whole bunch of cool experiments. So what we do as the technology TOSAs is we kind of go around to different school sites, and it kind of falls into any category that we're needed. Teachers can schedule us. There's actually a website that if we have time, I can pull it up at the end, that we've made that has a scheduling link. We use an app called Calendly that links to all of our Outlook calendars. And teachers can follow the one link, they can pull up a time that we are available, and since it links with our Outlook calendar, it will not allow us to be scheduled if we're at different school sites. So what we do is we provide teachers with that link. They can schedule us to come by to be a coach if they're wanting to use a specific app in the classroom. They just want us as a safety net. We will do full staff PD, but we'll also do, in a classroom setting, we have modeled a specific application, and then we've kind of eased the reins a little bit and have the teacher take over. And it's really been beneficial for teachers. We've gotten a lot of good feedback about just being in the room with them and being a coach on the side. It really kind of eases the stress because teachers, you know, we're all teachers by trade. There's a lot of plates that we're always spinning. So to have technology, if you're apprehensive about that, and as your coach, it's easy to just say, I can get to that tomorrow. Where having us in the classroom allows them to say, you know what, I think I'm going to try this today. And we've just gotten a lot of good feedback. So here's some photos of us doing just that. Oh, sure.
And just to share, you know, this is the first year that we've been in this position, and already at this point, it has taken off to the point where our schedules have been completely full. We've had teachers that we've had to kind of go back and forth and say, well, get you here, get you there. We are in demand. And I think what's happening is when teachers know we're there and we can kind of be that co-teacher and hold their hand through a process, now these closet techies, if you will, are coming out and saying, all right, I'm willing to try this. I want to do this with my students. I've seen that teacher doing it. I want to try this. And so, I mean, our calendars are booked consistently, weeks in advance for these teachers to have us to come out to their classrooms or entire school PD sessions.
Is it fair to say that you all are more curriculum support than you are, let's say, hardware support?
That's like our little slogan.
And I know that there's times where people say, okay, but how does that work? But that's just part of the curriculum aspect. And if I'm a teacher and I go, okay, I have this in my mind and I want to do this, but I don't know how to do it, is that when I would contact you all and say, okay, can you help me do this? And then you would maybe come in and either discover that, help me to point me in a direction, maybe model a lesson or coach a lesson with me?
Absolutely. We're referring to ourselves as the technology integration specialist people because it's really about integrating curriculum with technology, augmenting whatever they're doing already. Because that's our profession. We're teachers first, technology specialists second. So the phrase that we keep joking around is we'll integrate technology for you, but we won't do Windows and we won't fix printers. So because we're not IT people.
A good point you're making, because many people will say, well, with all this technology, you don't sit here playing with iPads, are you?
Right.
But you're making a point that's secondary to getting the ideas of.
Well, I was in a classroom and a teacher was giving this outstanding lesson that was based in standards. And she kind of, I think because it was me, was like, oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Kennedy, I'm not using technology today. And I stopped her and said, you are. What she did was she found this great website and she was projecting it onto her whiteboard and her students were using the whiteboard on the projector. I had to almost remind them, but you are. You use technology to obtain the right curriculum to meet the standards, and then you use it in a simple, straightforward, easy, low-tech, engaging way. That was integrating, and it was, again, about curriculum. It wasn't about hardware. And I know you guys try to break those walls down of helping And I know we're going to have a section here that technology isn't just a device, it's the overhead, it's the sound system that we're using. All of those are parts of those pieces and those tools that our educators are using.
Being innovative in a class, it doesn't require technology, but a lot of times when you see something innovative going on, there is some type of technology going on also. So you don't have to use, it's not about how many apps you have on your iPad. If it were, I would be a genius, because I have a lot. But it's really, but it really is about how it's being used in classrooms.
And Dan may have stolen this also, so but I'll give him credit, that's where I got it. But he has said before that the best educational technology is the invisible educational technology. When technology becomes invisible, that's when it's being used for.
I stole it from Dr. Geddes.
That's how it's
This is another video. We're in Miss Tyler's classroom this day, and this is kind of a, I'm not sure if this one will play. I believe this is on YouTube, so we can try. Big no. Okay. So basically, this was a kind of a collage video that we put together after we visited her classroom. Her students were using Google Apps for Education, and they were using a whole bunch of them in tandem with each other. So they were using Google Slides. Google Slides is like a PowerPoint alternative that their work lives in the cloud. They can share with the people that are at their table group, and they can all be working on the same presentation at the same time in real time on their devices. There were students that were on computers. There were students that were using their iPads, and they were all working asynchronously, simultaneously at the same time on different documents. And then at the end, they were able to display what they were doing up on the screen also without getting up and plugging any wires in. And it was just an excellent thing to see. I wanted to exemplify that in this video, but you can see one student using their iPad in this one. But we're seeing, and I wanted to put this there because we're seeing this across the district. This is not just a singular event. That's why I was thankful when I said at the beginning that we got this opportunity to have this position, because we do get to see a lot of the awesome things that teachers are already doing. So it's not just us coaching, but we after each visit, you know, we tell teachers all the time, tell us what you're doing, have us come back. We want to share what you guys are doing and exemplify you guys too, because it's not just about coaching, it's about celebrating too. Last thing, I like to, when I was at Citrus Springs Middle School, Mr. Rowland, a lot of times we would have positive share at the end of our staff meetings, and a lot of times it would be, you want to share any kind of technology tips. And here's one, I'm not sure if people are aware of this, but Google has a whole service that they offer. It's called Google Alerts. So if you just go to alerts.google.com, everybody has a Google account usually. All of our students do. And you can set it up. You can just search for search terms that you would normally search for on Google. It will give you an email digest at the end of the day, and you can actually set it up to be delivered to your email address at different times. Anytime something new is entered into Google's database that day, let's say you have a search term for your name, or educational technology, or new inventions. If something new is added that day, you will get an email digest with links that provide you with all this new information. So you get up-to-date things that have just been added to Google's database in your email address. So it's something that people aren't using a lot, but it's beneficial. So
I encourage everyone to put their own name and do it and have it there, because you'll be surprised. I mean, I actually have a list of every one of our board names and our school, and in case we get anything, I'm always, sharing and sending it out.
So that's how you get that.
That's how it is. It's actually Google Alerts that I use, because it's a very powerful tool.
So you didn't stand up all night.
No, it comes right to me. Google's doing the work.
And this is another good tool for if you're going over any kind of digital citizenship piece with your students, telling students, hey, here's what you should and shouldn't do online. Tell them to log in with their Google account and put in their name, because they'll get a digest of it. If anything new is added to the interwebs about their name, they will actually get a notification about it, so that they'll be surprised as to their digital footprint, what their persona is online. We always tell students, you can put it out there, but it's very hard. It's like a real tattoo. You have to pay a lot of money to get it taken away. So be careful what you post. And sometimes it's painful. Yes. Did you guys want to add anything? So thank you. We're going to pass it over to Dr. Geddes now to give you guys a little bit more of an instructional technology update.
You guys need a break, Ms. Powers, or?
Right after you.
Or after me?
We're at our 2-hour mark. I would kind of like to have a break now. How long is your presentation, Dr. Geddes?
It's lengthy.
Yeah.
No, not really. It's pretty long.
Yeah.
Okay. Exact, about 12 minutes, 12 minutes.